Tensions have been mounting for weeks on the Russian-Ukrainian border. Washington is warning an invasion by Russia could happen any time. Moscow has repeatedly denied such a plan and has accused the West of creating hysteria. Haiyang reports.
Ukraine has asked to meet with Russia and other members of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe within 48 hours, in a bid to bring down escalating tensions on its border. This came after Ukraine said on Sunday that Russia had ignored its request to explain its troop build-up near Ukraine's border. In his 15-minute call with U.S. President Joe Biden, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky invited Biden to Ukraine in the coming days. Zelensky said a visit by the U.S. president could help lower tensions. The White House made no mention of Zelensky's invitation in its readout of the two leaders' phone call. A U.S. intelligence report cited by news outlets said an invasion by Russia was expected on February 16th, but officials later on declined to confirm this.
It is still possible, we believe, that Russia could choose the diplomatic path, but the way they have built up their forces, the way they have maneuvered things in place, makes it a distinct possibility that there will be major military action very soon.
The U.S. also said that Russia might create a surprise pretext for an attack. Moscow slammed the U.S. statements and said those remarks were reminiscent of America's actions prior to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, when it alleged that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, European leaders have been searching for diplomatic solutions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is flying to Ukraine on Monday and Russia on Tuesday to defuse tensions. Scholz has advocated continuing diplomacy in different formats. His visit followed French President Macron's lengthy phone call with Putin and Macron's trip to Moscow last week. The Russian Foreign Ministry said the two leaders had an in-depth exchange. Putin expressed his dismay over the West's reluctance to convince Kyiv to observe the 2015 Minsk agreements. Amid the rising tensions, countries including the US, UK, Australia have urged their citizens to leave Ukraine immediately. But Zelensky has called for calm, saying that panic only benefited Ukraine's enemies.
I have to speak with our people like president and say people truth, and the truth that we have different information. And now the best friend for enemies, that is panic in our country. And all this information that helps only for panic doesn't help us.
Zelensky earlier warned that the economic instability within the country was Ukraine's biggest threat. Haiyang, CGTN.
Let's hear from some residents in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv and their reactions to these increasingly dire warnings of conflict.
I feel calm. You should always be ready for everything, and then you will have nothing to be afraid of.
I don't think there will be a serious military conflict. I think most probably there will be some economic blockade.
I think lots of Ukrainians nowadays facing the same problem, facing the same feelings. Yes, at some point, yes, we're afraid, but the most people just stay calm and they're trying to make their lives in different scenarios, maybe to move somewhere.
Now we have Zhang Xin joining us, Associate Professor at the School of Politics and International Relations of East China Normal University in Shanghai. Professor Zhang, thanks for being with us on Global Watch. So we're hearing a lot of this heated rhetoric between Russia and the US, and then you have the European countries continuing with diplomacy. What does this all tell us about the approach to Russia? Are the US and Western allies united?
There are some different interpretations of for example, how to approach Russia's security concerns and how to approach the post-Cold War security architecture in Europe among the Western countries. For example, the United States, along with NATO, generally speaking, holds a more confrontational stance against Russia's claim. And they overall believe that as a loser of the Cold War, Russia do not have the right to present its security demands to the United States, to NATO, who generally regard Russia as a key strategic competitor or even rival. But in contrast, you see some major European countries, in particular Germany and France, overall pose a more conciliatory stance regarding Russia's security concern. For example, President Macron of France a few days ago, before his visit to Moscow, openly acknowledged that Russia's security concern needs to be taken seriously, and that makes France and Germany quite different from U.S. and NATO's overall assessment of security structures, the nature of security structure in Europe versus Russia. So that opens some doors for Russia to take advantage of such different stance, and that is as part of the ongoing geopolitical big games we see in and around Ukraine and Russia.
Ukraine's president has been saying that the biggest enemy is panic in the country. So do you think he's right, or is he downplaying the threat of conflict?
He's both right and is trying to downplay the situation. Obviously, President Zelensky in the past 2 or 3 days have tried to pacify the situation on the ground, tried to tell his citizens and all the international audience, regardless whether a full-scale war is on the road or not, whether the full-scale military confrontation would materialize in the next few days. Panic, like what we see in Ukraine right now, is already doing a big damage to Ukrainian economy. For example, there's quite a bit of capital outflow during the past few days, and also the Ukrainian airspace is de facto being made into a no-fly zone, even though Ukrainian official administration actually want to keep the space open. But most of the European and American airlines have already declined not to fly over Ukrainian space. So that makes the Ukraine de facto a non-fly zone. So all these recent changes really is damaging the Ukrainian economy, which was not doing very well during the past few years. So I think President Zelensky obviously is trying to pacify the overall situation and not to draw Ukraine into a war mode, at least in the short run.
So should war really break out, what would the impact be on the US and the rest of Europe? They'd be drawn in, wouldn't they?
If a full-scale war in Ukraine did break out, which I think is actually a highly unlikely situation right now. Obviously, that kind of warfare would destabilize the Ukrainian as well as European economy, sabotage some of the very important close economic ties between Europe, including both Western Europe, the old Europe, and Eastern Europe, the so-called New Europe, and Russia and the Eurasia. Right? For example, the key pipeline project between Russia and Germany, the so-called Nord Stream 2, is very likely to be sacrificed if a full-scale war did break out in the few days time period. Right? So such economic ties are going to be the collateral damage of the geopolitical rivalry we see right now. On the other hand, a war situation in Ukraine, in the heartland of Europe, probably can bring some positive impact on the U.S. economy. It may benefit the international position of the U.S. dollar, and even may help bring capital from the broader European market back into the United States domestic capital market. So that probably will have a different impact, at least in the short run, to the U.S. economy. So we will see a very different impact on Europe and on the United States if a full-scale war did break out.
Professor Zhang, thank you so much. We appreciate your insights and time. That's Zhang Xin with East China Normal University.